So it brings me back to the presentation on the finance and development. Anti-state committee is of track. Let me get out of this one. I need a charger just for me to be able to repair. My battery is low. Charger
So I'm realizing the committees that you sit in are very powerful. So you know it's like I'm packing it with
well, this one I thought someone else was going to present. I had to panel beat it because I normally deal with the gender aspect of the budget. But I'll try and go through the budget process. We said we have the Finance and Development Committee, and that committee is the custodian of the council budget, the collection of revenue, and the disbursement of funds to deliver services. Services, they include water, sanitation, health, housing, education. Which are the services? Environmental management, right? So, and one speaker earlier spoke about the woman being able to work with the dollar. With the dollar, even in the weeks. So it's kind of any kind of budget like that. With the budget, right? It's just a way of managing the resource that we have. So if you have collected a dollar, if you as a mother, you managed to raise a dollar, and in Zimbabwe, I think we are the best case start because that dollar is doing a lot. Right. So as council, we also have a budget. Our cake, Lonalero, Singames collector, even Ganan, Melamanza Pumi, Impopi, and Meles is in Jani, Samutwe. Mele, our school of the Catholics, how many schools? 30 primary schools in one secondary school. Mele is school of Ezozi, or fact. I wonder about the same class in Mapu, they pass it. And some of our schools are actually getting the Permanent Secretary's Award for being the best schools in terms of producing very good resident results. Am I right, councillors? Good, Mama? Yes. So with that small cake, council tries by all means to run the organization. So lapha ngicasisa nje ngebudget ukuthi kuyini. So ibudget sesidefinile, a plan expressed in financial terms for the operations and resources of a local authority for a specified period. Our period is January to December. And when this budget has been approved by the minister, it runs from that period, January to December. We also have to make sure that the local authority's budget is what? Gender responsive. And there are key terms that guide us as a local authority when we are producing our gender responsive budgeting. Council has to have a gender management system. That's why I'm standing in front of you. City of Bulawayo is not just a desk which can be run by anybody. It's actually an office. The mayor is the gender champion with all his 38 councillors and the management, and the office is housed in the Human Capital Department that works with the, now the council departments are 9, with the 9 departments. Then we have employment expenditure, budget allocation for full-time, part-time and casual employment, employment equity related expenses, governance and water counseling. When you look at the proportion of men and women, that are employed by council, you establish that there are more men than women that council employs. And our constitution says, section 17, there shall be gender balance. The state shall ensure that there shall be gender balance in all spheres, public and private. Then there is also what we call gender-specific programming that council has to cater for and have gender in mainstream programs. All right, so the legal framework, in as far as the actual budget is concerned, like I said, local authorities have 2 acts. There's the rural and the urban. Then there's the one Public Finance Management Act. That one affects all of us. And the various SIs and the instructions that come from the minister from time to time. Forgive me, I might not have the current ones. These things are changing almost. So I don't know about the SIG and stuff. Right, so why do we budget as the local authority? To improve performance monitoring, motivate staff, improve communication and coordination of programs and sub-programs, control expenditure, ownership of results, and minimize losses. When we're talking about ownership of results, remember the councillors said one of their roles is stakeholder engagement. That comes there, and it also plays very well in our agenda budgeting. All right, and the types of budget, we said we have the recurrent operational budget and the capital budget. The recurrent operation, that's the revenue, that's the one where you were talking about who's Varila Man's cancer. Then the capital comes capital budget. No, it's critical, this one. Service kulumangani. Service kulumanga kutenga impact property. Ama yellow machines, and recently I saw we were commissioning heavy equipment. Ama refuse compactors, ama grader, land, kutengwa through ini capital budget. Izakhiwo zika-council if we want to build new infrastructure, whether it's school or whether in clinic or youth center, according to the budget, we crafted through consultation. Kumele kuthengwe via that. Then the Minister of Local Government, Minister of Finance, has instructed that all the budgets, all the services be run under what is called program-based budgeting. I also want you to keep thinking about those committees that we were talking about. They fit into the programs. We have the first program, we have about 6 programs that we are supposed to be making and directing our energies towards. The first program is called Governance and Administration. The governance equals council and administration. So we are the departments, the HODs in their structures. So under that, there should be a budget for governance and administration for the operations of the council, which is our councillors, all the councillors, the town clerk or town secretary's office, the human resources management, finance, technical and support services. That's program number 1. And when you look at it, you see the GP there. And you see the full council there. You see finance and development committee in that program. You see a bit of environment, but mainly finance and development. Then the program number 2 is water, sanitation and hygiene. Again, states the committee is future water, and the committee engineering, the health, sanitation on the solid side, and things like that. So you see those programs, those services falling under those programs, and they are budgeted as such. Solid waste management, wastewater management, and water services. Then program number 3, social services. This one, that's where your education. your health, your housing, social amenities. I think City of Flower is also unique and special in doing all of that. I think we are one of the local authorities that has managed to continue and even improve on the running of social amenities. We have youth centers, we have recreation centers, we've got vocational training centers, such that the community, our children, our youths, they should not be found loitering. So I would like to encourage those of you who are in here to encourage the youths that are out there to take advantage of the services that council offers. They are budgeted for by council and they are running as we speak. Then we have program number 4, which is Imigwa roads, road infrastructure, traffic management. We have public safety, security services, where you have your fire and ambulance, as the emergency services, security services, street lighting, public lighting, street lighting in the city, toilets, LRT, and things like that. Then the last program is natural resources. This one in urban councils seems to be a small program with a small budget, but when you go to rural settings, that one is actually. But you see what it's also important for us to manage our environment, to mitigate against climate change. Are we together? Any questions, comments on the issues I have presented so far, on the programs? Additions from councillors on the programs? Okay, there is a hand there. Enzela ukuthi oversight bona batsho ukuthi babona njani indlela esisebenza ngayo ngoku-allocate kwezimali ezikhe the programs.
Maybe enza uyenza ukuthi like programs yikho kuleyo khona izinto ze-arts and culture lapho ezabhajethi 300,000 annual. Sasifaka khona i-23,500 festival ekhona mhlaka esizaba nayo nge-first week of June esileBulawayo Day. That explains easily the issue of budgeting. Ukuthi nxa sesiconsultile zabudget kuba nemali esiyifakayo kuma-programs i-300K abantu abekhala ngayo ukuthi why did you take it to the water? No, service budgetile sakhangela ukuthi izinto kumele sizenze singoBulawayo kuma-social services izinto ku-arts and culture. Thank you.
We are Saturday, right? Anyone else wants? Okay.
iBulawayo is the only local authority on social amenities in centers. Now this is in partnership with other donors. 24 years. Age limit 24 years. Ziligazi craft center ngama skills training. Then kube lokufundisa abantu abangomama izinto ze-culture abazenzayo lazo zisiya thisha kwamanye amazwe. Again, on our diversities, again as a city, it is obviously SK Arts and Culture. So among the African countries, in Zimbabwe, Bulawayo, African culture capital. So amongst all the African countries, yithi Bulawayo esakhethwayo i-UNESCO recently, I think it's a 2 months back, really launch khona pha Bulawayo. Ngikhuluma ngisenze follow up councillor kuSkululeke Moyo in addition to Bulawayo Arts Festival ezaba khona on the first week of June.
Thank you very much. I don't have much time. My presentation is long. I don't know what I will do. But at least the program, I have given a summary in terms of what we budget for. I wanted to go into detail perhaps on certain areas, but I will just run it down. So even when we are looking for partnerships, when we're looking for funding, right? it's easy for one to go figure out what I'm very interested in government administration. But this one is much it has to do with the governance and administration. And if someone wants to partner with the city of Bulawayo, they will look at our strategic plan, our programs, our funding, and say, okay, this is the area I would like to partner with the local authority, and we proceed. So we've enjoyed a lot of funding partnerships for governance and administration, water, sanitation, and hygiene. I think the Sakumbula we had the Bulawayo Water and Sewerage Services Improvement Project, which ended last year, which was funded by the African Development Bank. We currently have Waterworks Bay, which is also supporting that area. Social services, like Mama was talking about, Fundiswama skills, we have gender links that are supporting in the training and making of crafts. And we have women, youths and men, persons with disabilities who are benefiting from that. They didn't end, they even helped in renovation or rehabilitation of our rundown infrastructure. And youths, Mama Bachona Lapa, besenza basket, besenza crafts, as were exported and again cancel in foreign currency, they even. So it makes it easier for the local authority. Mina when sitting in Muntu agenda, so in right. So you'll find what in the programs that we have been talking about, gender being a cross-cutting issue. All the 6 programs, gender is integrated into it, and efforts are being made to integrate gender as the SDGs, those were talked about earlier. Right, and as the country's priority goals and the NTS 1, and we are all familiar with that. That's why I'm just quickly running down to say those programs that we spoke about, the budgets that we allocate, they are in line with especially those development pillars as the NTS 1. So when we are looking at the gender responsive budgeting, we are saying whatever council budgets for should be guided by the National Gender Policy, should be guided by the National Disability Policy, the Constitution of Zimbabwe, and the various protocols, conventions, guidelines that our country has ratified. But the city of Bulawayo doesn't just end there. It also has its own gender policy. It also has its own disability policy. And all that in our budget process, we try to ensure that we integrate and we leave no one behind. And when we are looking at gender and inclusion, we look at in our planning, how do we integrate gender and inclusion? How do we integrate gender into budget consultations? And how do you ensure that the consultation process is inclusive? Right. So for us, when we are doing budget consultation, we consider the time. When calling for a meeting, the councillors would ask, so we discuss the budget. Can you arrange for budget consultation in your meetings? And when we are considering, we are looking at what right, when do we meet our residents? What is the most comfortable time for mama, youth? Perhaps we even need to meet the women alone, or we need to meet the youth alone, so that they express their wishes. Budget year council. Right. What about the languages? What methods? So there can be physical consultations. They can be online consultation, like in this case, COVID. Science and consultant online. Last year, we didn't do the physical consultations because that's kind of so all those things are taken into consideration. Attendance, to account, we consulted everybody. We have a register that we follow and try to capture who has attended our budget consultations. What were their comments? What were their inputs? Right. There I'm just making reference to old budget, and then So we have these templates that I'm reading out that we follow to ensure that the budget is gender inclusive, pro-poor, doesn't leave anybody behind. All right? And the programs, the allocation of funding is also analyzed, right? What gender considerations were taken into account in the overall allocation of budgets. Council clinic services, in terms of the laws of the country, the council clinics offer what is called primary health care. Primary health care is the most basic health care where you have immunization of children, maternal services, things like that. They are generally free. It's mandatory. But what council asks for when they ask for payments is to keep their administrative fees, to keep the walls and the things that are there standing. Otherwise, services would generally be offered for free. And access to free water. Future water Alright, so remember those programs, and this is just an analysis of one of our old budgets on how we did that. Alright, categorization of the budget expenditure, right? You remember the programs I spoke about and the definitions that I gave you. At one point, our budget had the analysis showing that most of our funding goes to mainstream programs, those programs that we I listed. Right. So on employment, remember I said program 1, we even analyze that where are the women, where are the youths, where are the managers, and you can see that men dominate in council. Right. Where else? The policies I've already touched on. Here I'm just showing some of the services that we offer. And the disbursements and where the funding is going and how gender plays out in each particular program. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I will end there.
Okay, so I'm going to speak to us today about the opportunities for women in local governance and the current gaps that exist in that.
Full screen. Do you want full screen? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. Where is our full screen? I'm looking at. Okay. This should be this one. Yeah. No, we do, but it's not yet full screen.
I think it's
yes, now it's not.
All right. Okay, so I think since morning we've spoken a lot on the opportunities that exist for women in local governance. But however, I think in my presentation I'll touch more even beyond the issue of the quota system, because local governance is not all about the quota system or even the position of a councillor. There are other opportunities that exist for women to participate in local governance beyond being councillors, to ensure that our fight for gender equality is effective in local governance. So maybe firstly I'll acknowledge that despite the fact that there are legal frameworks that exist, some presenters have alluded to the legal frameworks, the Constitution, the Urban Councils Act, Traditional Leaders Act, even the conventions that Zimbabwe subscribes to that speak about issues of gender equality. There are challenges that exist, like we have discussed since morning, Uguti, women still struggle to find a foothold in local governance. So maybe firstly, there are like several, like I mentioned in my presentation, there are sections 56, even the Electoral Act speaks about non-gender discrimination in political party campaigns. There are sections 317 in the Constitution, even Section 8. There are a lot of sections in the Constitution that speak about gender equality. Like Ubusi said in the morning, you should not feel like women are being done a favor. It's a constitutional right for women to participate in local governance processes. So maybe firstly, the opportunity that I'll speak about is the issue of being a councillor. Either being an elected councillor or being a PR councillor. It's one of the major opportunities that are there in local governance. So we should acknowledge what in this room, the women that are here have one of the best opportunities for women participation in local governance, because if you're a councillor, there are a lot of opportunities that are there for you to participate in local governance or even advance the participation of other women in local governance processes in Zimbabwe. For instance, one councillor mentioned in the morning that the councillors are policy makers. So that's a very big opportunity for women to participate, because if you are able to influence policies, which means you are able to then drive for councils to have policies that are gender responsive. If we speak about issues of property ownership, what are the laws in the council or in the country that govern the participation of women? So it is us, the policymakers, that have that opportunity to ensure that councillors adopt laws or implement existing laws that promote the participation of women. We spoke about the fact that there is an issue of resources that hinder women participation in local governance or effective participation of councillors or assuming some of the positions. So it is the duty of the councillors or an opportunity as a policy maker to ensure that policies are adopted or implemented to ensure that the council, for instance, has a register of the total number of women who own property, for instance, in Bulawayo. And we should ask ourselves as the councillors to say how many women are owning property. And if that register is not there, which means women will continue to be marginalized because we don't know how to track, because we don't have the information after all of the status quo of women owning properties in the city or in the country. And there's also an opportunity to influence local authority budgets that Mrs. Manyemo spoke about. And the budget is like a Bible for the local authority, because nothing is done aside the budget. So which means you are influencing, you are the drivers of service delivery if you are a councillor, because you are able to influence what's on the budget. Hence you are influencing service delivery. You are already influencing the status of women in terms of the services that they are getting. For instance, in the morning, my sister from Moyo spoke about the fact that imagine if a man maybe is chairing a committee and they are not living the realities of women. But if we are women and we are part of these processes, we are then able to ensure that the needs of the women are being advanced through the local authority budget, and even the opportunity to monitor. Someone spoke about the fact that councillors play oversight role, because it's another thing to have a budget that may be gender responsive. It's another thing to implement that budget. Are we ensuring that this budget is being implemented as it is, or we are just leaving some course that should advance service delivery, like water being viramented to other maybe not so important issues, like maybe buying council vehicles that may not be that necessary, or maybe purchasing a mayoral mansion when there is another mansion, whilst the residents continue to suffer on issues of water, which affects mostly women. And also as councillors, there's an opportunity to approve key decisions through council resolutions. And we know if you hear a resolution was made, it's sort of like it's a standing order. This resolution was made. So as councillors, are we ensuring the resolutions that are made by the council, which are the final decisions, are in favor of advancing the needs of women? And also another opportunity to chair council committees or be the members of council committees that were mentioned during this meeting, to say if you are a member, like my brother from ERC mentioned that it's not important that you are a chair, but even being a member of that council. So we're saying as women, it's not enough for us or for you to be elected or be appointed as a councillor. But what are you doing? Are you ensuring that you are part of these key decision-making processes? Because you can be there and even sit on the chambers and not influence decisions, which means we're not doing justice to advancing gender equality. But there are those opportunities that we should grab as women in leadership, as councillors that have been elected or appointed, to ensure that we drive decision-making, we drive service delivery to advance the needs of women. And also the opportunities to head council, to ensure that we are part of those people that like make some of the final decisions, like the role of being a mayor or the role of being a deputy mayor, to ensure that we had a challenge where there is low representation of women in councillorship, for instance. And then now we have increased, we now have PR councillors, but we don't have a deputy mayor who is a woman, we don't have a mayor who is a woman. Why is it like that? We should ensure that as women, we take up those leadership positions so that we're at a position of influence, not a position of following those that are influencing. And imagine if it's men that are influencing, what will be the scenario in terms of advancing the rights of women and girls in our local authorities. And also, like I mentioned, that it's not about being mayors and councillors. There are also other roles that women can assume in local governance to ensure that our agenda is advanced at a better footage, like executive positions, such as the town clerks, the CEOs, the heads of departments. How many heads of departments are females in Bulawayo City Council, for instance? How many town clerks are females in Zimbabwe or CEOs in RDCs? We should ask ourselves those, because imagine we may have 100 councillors or maybe 32 female councillors, but we have town clerks, senior executive positions that are dominated by men. They are going to try by all means to subdue the decisions that you are making as policies, as policymakers. And even that's why sometimes you find out that councillors maybe have been bribed or convinced by the executive. At times you find out that residents will be even asking who is employing who is in a better, who is at a higher position, the councillor or the town clerk. Because at times, because those positions are dominated by men, they will try to ensure that they control the policymakers, whereby the policymakers are the residents and they are the employers of those executive positions. So we should strive as civil societies, even as policymakers, to ensure that if there is a vacancy, maybe for a head of department, are we trying to influence councils to ensure that women occupy these influential positions so that we're able to better advance the agenda for improving gender equality and service delivery status quo? And if you are in the executive position, you are able to make key executive decisions. And the issues of resource allocation and utilization, you know, at times you find out that councillors may say the budget, may actually find the budget being complicated, because I'm sure maybe the stages of the drafts and all, there are technical issues that are mostly done by executive employees of the council. So are we having women in those executive positions to ensure that wherever that jargon of the budget is being done, there are women that are standing in for women, so that as councillors, if we're now coming in to support, we have other women even in the executive positions to support what we want to stand for as women. And the issue of implementing policies and the needs of women, most of the work of the council, we make decisions as councillors, but most of the work, the implementation is done by the executive employees in the council. How many women, like Mrs. Manyemo gave us on a slide, and it like women are not so many in especially the top positions in the council. What does it mean in terms of the willpower to implement gender responsive policies or programs for the city of Bulawayo? There is also an issue of the provincial council, though it's an issue that's really under debate, but it's an opportunity to ensure that women are part of those councils, to ensure that they also advance the women's issues in terms of the local governance agenda. And even going down beyond the duties of being a councillor, there are ward calls. Are we being cautious as councillors to ensure that women are part of the ward calls that work with the councillors to advance at a grassroots level projects and programs? And for instance, imagine at times you find out that a councillor maybe has a part of the ward core, maybe the chair of that ward core, or I don't know if their ranks is or maybe the assistants is a male, whilst 52% of the population are females. Why not as a women have a gender bias? Because men have had that gender bias to say, I'm going to uplift another woman to ensure that part of the ward core, we are biased to ensure that we have more women being part of the grassroots level decision-making processes in local governance. Because if we have many women, they will influence you as the councillor to say, why not have community guidance? Why not have these such and such projects that advance the needs of women in the ward, vis-a-vis having men that may not have the interests of women at heart. And also there are other platforms for women to participate in local governance, such as the low level, like residence meetings, where feedback meetings where women come. What effort is being done to ensure that women are participating? Those are part of the platform, because it is from participating from grassroots that one gains interest in local governance and end up assuming leadership positions. Like Umama Kumalo mentioned in the morning, which is some of us from Bupra. It's a low level local governance structure. But then if you are there, we ensure that many women are in part of those structures. That's when they gain interest in local governance, gain interest in being councillors, and later gain interest in even assuming other higher positions in other tiers of governance besides local governance. And also there's an opportunity for women to own properties. And it's important because in the morning, someone mentioned the issue of resources. What are we doing to ensure that women are property owners? And I know there are certain laws that require councils to have budgets of property ownership in terms of gender disaggregation. And we should advance that agenda as councillors to ensure that women own property, because like one councillor mentioned, some of the disrespect comes to women because they'll say, like Councillor Kalazani said, ulan. So we should ensure that women own properties. If there are tenders, how many percent of those tenders are being given to women, so that we empower them economically and enhance their voices so that they are heard when they speak in key decision-making tables. And also the electorate will also gain confidence, like someone mentioned in the morning, Uti ubaba ungathaule mota kuyathiwa right. So what are we doing to ensure that mama labo balezi mota lazo ezilamaviri emuva? Maybe the electorate would then believe ukuthi women can lead us. And also maybe dwelling into the gaps that exist in the current local governance system in terms of local governance. And again, we've since morning even spoke about some of these issues, or identify the quota system as one of the gaps, which is a good thing, but it has its gaps in this scenario. The issue of PR councillors, whereby it has been seen that despite the PR system being put in place to ensure that women are found in leadership position, it has its downfalls, because we find out that political parties will then say, you have these seats as women, and then in terms of women having opportunities to be given an opportunity to contest as elected councillors, they are then reduced, because they are saying you already have 8 women, or how many women that will get into PR councillors. So it's important to ensure that there is that reform within political parties, to ensure that women are not only reserved for PR positions, but they are given an opportunity to contest for positions, because we cannot deal with only PR councillors. We need more women that are also elected, so that we increase the number of women. And also another challenge is the lack of set guidelines or operations for PR councillors. That was highly debatable in the morning. The issue of seniority, whereby some PR councillors feel like I don't have a ward, and then another councillor has a ward. So there is need for us to advance for set guidelines to ensure that PR councillors' role is clear and not contested. And maybe it's not about guidelines, but even processes, or even just set guidelines through conversations, like one councillor mentioned, we need to work together as councillors even to solve that matter. It doesn't even need a legislative to do that. And also there's an issue of political parties not being bound to be gender sensitives in terms of forwarding nominees to contest in elections. And maybe we need a legislation to ensure that political parties are given a certain percentage, like to say, if you are submitting your names for candidates, maybe you need a 40%, and if you are not allowed to submit a list of candidates to contest in an election, because if there is no law, the Constitution provides that there is need for a gender balance, but it's not explicit. But maybe we need a legislative reform to set the guidelines, like the issue of PR councillors and the quota system in Parliament is being followed, because there is a legislation that clearly states that this should be done. So maybe we need that also in terms of other positions that are elected, to have a set guideline, because surely the quota system is not enough. And also, maybe there is need for councils to set aside budgets for PR councillors to implement development projects, because we know that councillors that are elected, they have access to the ward retention fund. But if you are a PR councillor, you have no direct access, unless maybe the councillor that you are working with is kind like councillors school that you are working together. Imagine if you're not having that scenario. The electorate would think that you are not contributing to their development, which may otherwise be the fact that you have no access to any funds to then come up with development projects like the elected councillors do. And also, we find out that another gap is that when women are in local government, they are not given equal opportunities after assuming office. You are now a councillor, we are now female councillors. Issues have risen from morning that some positions like chairing the finance committees is being given to men, because there are not set guidelines that guard the issue of gender balance, because the Constitution will say you are not supposed to have a gender bias. And I'm sure the gender policy of the local authority states that, but it would be something that's not clearly stated. And because of lack of political will, with us having many executive or mayors that are male, that will not be put into action to say, are we having a balance in terms of committee membership, committee chairing position in the local authority, and even at provincial council level. And also, there is need for legislative reforms to be done. I think it's the same issue of to set guidelines for the election of council committees, to say, of course, they are not detected, they are voted into the chairing positions, but what are the guidelines in terms of gender balance for those positions? And there are also other issues that hinder effective participation of women in local governance, such as online violence that happens when a woman sets to assume leadership positions, where you find out that there is naming and shaming, people even publishing personal information about women. What are we doing about gender reforms? Because if media reforms, if we do not have media reforms, women will continue even making a choice of not participating in leadership positions because they fear being shamed in media. And also there are issues of, in terms of Traditional Leaders Act, whereby the Constitution clearly states that there should be no bias in terms of leadership in terms of assuming of leadership. But then you find out that there are other acts that contravene that, like the Traditional Leaders Act will tell you that for one to be chief, you have to follow norms and traditions, of which we know that in terms of traditions, there are some areas whereby they've never had a chief since the villages were established. So it makes it difficult for women in rural areas to assume leadership positions, and therefore there's need to realign legislation like the Traditional Leaders Act to align with the Constitution, so that even women in rural councils are able to participate in local governance through traditional leadership positions. And also there are issues that need to be addressed in terms of gender inequality within families, whereby the division of labor in households and the cultural attitudes where women are deemed to be belonging to the kitchen. And if we do not change those mindsets, even the electorate will not view women as capable leaders, because they think we cannot be led by women. So we need to transform mindsets of the electorate, the politicians, and even our systems in terms of the government. And also the culture of patriarchy that exists is one of the issues that hinder effective participation of women, like I mentioned, where men dominate and they feel like we cannot give the power to women. And also there's a need to change the mindset in concerning the PR councillors, and from morning I can safely say we need to change mindsets of both the electorate and even the elected themselves on issues of PR councillors and their roles, so that they are also afforded space to effectively represent the concerns of women in local governance. And also another challenge is low participation in economic development, where women have no access to financial resources. And you know that there is a high cost associated with assuming positions in local governance. For instance, if you want to be elected as a councillor, you need the resources. And if you have no access to economic development opportunities, it will remain difficult for women to effectively participate, because they will not have the resources to then fund themselves to be part of those processes. And also there is an issue of stigma towards female leaders by their male colleagues, especially in political parties, where they are not transformed in their mindset in terms of gender mainstreaming. And maybe this issue of gender mainstreaming should be focused on political parties for some time, to ensure that they are transformed and they are the drivers of gender equality, so that we achieve positive participation of women in local governance. And maybe in conclusion, I would say that despite the legislative frameworks that exist for women to participate, it remains difficult if we do not invest in transforming the minds of our leaders, the minds of the electorate about women in leadership. And we need to economically empower women, align our legislation with the Constitution that clearly promotes gender equality, and we need to set a condition for political parties to ensure that they align with the Constitution in terms of having a positive gender bias when they are submitting candidates for an election. And also the issue of capacity strengthening, that can not be ever overemphasized, to ensure that councillors, either elected or appointed, can effectively carry out their role, so that the electorate will see that yes, women can deliver, and then they will continue to then aspire to have female leaders in their wards. So I thank you for now.